than a month since I last live streamed, and today I have the pleasure to welcome Eric Solender again from Mindstand, who's a maintainer, CTO and co-founder of Mindstand, and also maintainer of GoGM. So welcome, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And before we dive right into the GoGM topic, I wanted to share with you all a few information. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to send them through the chat. I'm monitoring that closely. So let me share my screen for a few seconds. As you may know, there is a Nodes 2021 conference that's going to happen right around the corner. So in a couple of weeks, 17th of June to be accurate. So if you want to learn about what other people are doing with Neo4j, may it be data science or application development, integration, etc., or learn maybe about new product announcements, please register. We'll be so happy to see you and share the experience with you. So that's about Nodes 2021. Another event, this time that I'm personally organizing, but I also get support for Neo4j and actually from Eric, because he will be representing GoGM there. It's next Saturday. It's a free event as well. The idea, so it's called Hack Commit Push, and the idea is to help participants learn to contribute to open source projects. So you pick a project in the list, like GoGM, for instance, or ASCII Doctor, or what have you. And the project lead or leads will help you towards your first contributions together, so you don't have to learn the code base by yourself in getting stuck, etc., etc. So that's a great occasion to start contributing to open source. I was saying there are a few Neo4j projects. There are even optional trainings in the morning, so you can learn about Git if you're not feeling too comfortable about it, about the basics of Neo4j as well, thanks to Michael Hunger. And on the Neo4j side, you have GoGM, as I was saying, with Eric and Nikita. There is as well APOC, which is a collection of Cypher extensions that you can install on top of Neo4j. There is a Cypher DSL, which is a Java project to write type-safe queries. And for people who attended my live stream about Spring Data Neo4j, that's what I covered in the last parts of that series. There is a brand new Neo4j GraphQL library. So if GraphQL is your thing, you might want to join the event and contribute with Daniel. And yeah, I think that's it on the Neo4j side. There are obviously many more projects that you can pick based on your interests. And of course, the event is free. You don't have to be there all the time. So those are actually UTC +2, that is Paris, France time. So 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. So Eric, for instance, decided to participate, but it will be, I think, right in the middle of the night. So it's friendlier to Western Europeans. But of course, if you live in the US or in another time zone that is a bit further away, you're more than welcome to join. And you don't have to stay the whole event. You can stay maybe a couple of hours, start working on issue with the lead, and then continue on your own time if the timing is a bit difficult.
Yep.
And so
for me outside of DC, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, for me outside DC, it'll be around 3 a.m. when it starts.
Yep. So I'm not sure there'll be many people in the same time zone, but if you feel like following Eric's example, we'll be glad to have you all there. And thanks again for Eric for representing GoGM, and also Neo4j for helping for supporting the initiative. And then, as you might have followed the previous episodes, so we talked about GoGM already back in December, so it seems like a lifetime ago. So we covered an introduction to GoGM, so how it works, get the basic concepts. And then we also continued on that with a few more demos in the second episode, but we decided to resume the series now. And so we're going to recap really briefly what we've done in the first two episodes. But then Eric is going to talk about the upcoming V2. So V2 is not released yet, so it's like a brand new thing that's about to be released. So yeah, let's enjoy the show, and thank you, Eric, for leading the charge and showing and teaching us all about GoGM and GoGM V2.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Do I need to do something to share my? Okay, there it goes. All right.
Yes.
Hi everyone. Just to introduce myself again, I'm Eric Solender. I am the Chief Technology Officer of Mindstand Technologies, which is a AI startup in Maryland in the United States. We do HR technology with integrations into most communication platforms. Internally, our main database is Neo4j, and we're a Go shop. So naturally, I wanted a better tool, or I wanted an OGM in Go to write the code for my company. And since none existed, myself and one of our other co-founders decided we would build our own. So that's where GoGM came from. So in the original V1 of GoGM, we had like a basic session set up that could load objects, save objects, but there were some problems with it. Like for example, on uuids as a ID, it didn't really give a lot of room to play with that. And it was also a package level instance. So you couldn't make multiple GoGMs with multiple configs. You just initialize the package and that's it. Additionally, there weren't a lot of controls for timeouts, for using Golang context pattern. And under the hood, things that should have been running as transactions regardless of user input were not running as transactions. So unless you, what's the word for it? Unless you explicitly specify that it needs to be a transaction, it wouldn't run as one, and then you could have unpredictable errors if, say, save failed halfway through. So a lot of those higher level things have been addressed. So just to show back to what GoGM V1 looks like, you have your basic struct. You have you can type def stuff. You have your struct tags defining things, but really this is in the main GoGM. You define a config, you initialize the package, and then you just create sessions off of the main package. That's really how GoGM works. So I'd say the biggest change now in GoGM V2 is GoGM is an object. So everything that was stored at the package level is now stored at the object level. And now we have a notion of a global GoGM. So that's where you can initialize one GoGM instance, set that to be what GoGM is storing as a singleton, and then you can access it through just the G function. So in a similar way to, like, if anyone uses the zap logger, you can access the logger by zap.l, or how with open tracing, you can access the global open tracing context. It's the same idea. So within the GoGM initialization, the config hasn't changed too much. Let me navigate over to that. So a couple of things have been changed. So now instead of a amount of tries in a transaction, we have a transaction timeout. And we've also defined a logger. So now you're not forced to use the logress logger. We just define logger as a package or as a interface. You can implement it and wrap your own logger in it. So we also allow driver level logs to be exposed now. So all this function's doing is taking this logger and wrapping it so that it'll work with the driver. And then we implemented a default Neo4j logger, which just uses the default, or not Neo4j logger. We implemented a default logger, which just uses the default Go logger under the hood. And if you don't specify a logger, it'll use this one. Yeah, you can enable the log level. You can enable driver level logs. So like inside of the Neo4j driver. This is also, so when we're logging queries for security reasons, you may not want to log the params you're passing into it, but you may want to know what the actual query was. So I made it so you can turn that on and off if you need to. For example, when I'm trying to figure out why a query is working, I may want to turn that on, but in production, you don't want to log like someone's password or some sensitive information that you're passing into it. So, and every time you try to go in with this, it'll log a warning message to you. The other thing we've added is open tracing support. So inside of the new session, when you pass in a context, it looks to see if this is enabled and you passed a context that has open tracing in it, it'll start tracing its calls too, so that you can see how long your query is taking and add any relevant information to it. So that's essentially...
Can you explain a little more what open tracing is if people don't know about it?
Okay, so open tracing is essentially like a distributed stack trace, except the difference is it also records the amount of time it takes to process a function. So if I hit session.save, it'll tell me how long that whole function took. And then if you're going down the stack, it'll also show you how long the subcalls within that took. The bigger part of it is if you're using a microservice architecture, you can pass traces between services. So say you hit an API and that calls some database or that contacts another worker or something, you can pass the tracing and then see in the UI how that call propagates through your system. So when you get like a 500 internal server error off an API, you can just look in tracing and see what that actually means and not spend hours combing through Kubernetes logs like I have suffered through. Instead, you have it all in one place. So the reason we added this to GoGM is within my company, we've been implementing open tracing, and we want to do analytics on how efficient our queries are. So adding it to GoGM was the most logical choice for us. Also, if you're wondering where I'm looking, I have a monitor right here with all the code on it. So that's why I keep looking that way. But anyway, so yeah, so to review, the main change so far is GoGM is an object. You can create multiples of it, and the config has changed a bit, and we've added support for tracing. So now I'll show the new session interface. Actually, I'll show the session interface is probably better. So, so if you can see here, so session really just takes in, it takes in the transaction interface. Actually, it's probably better to show how session, actually, I'll go to the integration test. That's probably better. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, here's probably a better example of how it actually initialized itself. So to create a GoGM instance, this is within the package. So normally you'd call it gogm.new, but since we're inside the package, we just call new at a package level. The parameters are pretty much the same as before, where you pass in a config and then pointers to anything you want to map, and it returns an instance of GoGM, and it returns an error. So the next thing that you can do is down here. So off of GoGM, GoGM kind of is treated like a session factory. So it initializes a driver internally, and then you can generate GoGM sessions off of it. So iSession is deprecated now. That's the session from GoGM v1. It still works. I made sure that it's backwards compatible with excuse me, I made sure to make sure that it's backwards compatible with GoGM v1 so it doesn't break anyone, and it's a new session at a package level function still work. It just uses GoGM to do that. But off of the GoGM session, you can create the default session, or you can create a new session. In the new GoGM, we've changed some naming schemes around. I came from a very C# Java heavy background, so my naming originally followed Java and C# naming. That's why there's I in front of interfaces. In the new implementation, interfaces are just the name and then implementations and an impl. We're trying to go more in the Go style. So you create your session like this. You pass into
before
it.
you dive into the session,
please?
I just had a follow-up question on the backwards compatibility. So are you saying that people can, once V2 is released, of course, they can upgrade to V2 without changing any code, or will there be some breaking changes?
So the only change that they would have to do is how GoGM is initialized. Actual usage hasn't changed. So okay. What I mean by that is instead of calling gogm.init and then checking if that errored out, instead you have to call gogm.new and then gogm.set global gogm and pass the gogm instance you made into that, and then it works like it did before. The interface definition hasn't changed at all for the original session. Under the hood, there have been a little bit of upgrades, but on the interface level and the usage level, nothing's changed for session V1. I wanted to make sure we didn't break anyone and that we addressed some issues the original session had. So yeah, if you don't want to upgrade just yet, but you want the fixes that come, when I release it, I'll have documentation about upgrading and options for upgrading. But yeah. And then the only thing I guess that you could say changed is I renamed iEdge to Edge, but that shouldn't really break anything. So yeah. So session has not changed. It's just deprecated and will probably be removed somewhere in the GoGM 2 release cycle or GoGM 3, once we figure out what GoGM 3 even is. I haven't thought about that yet. So to review, the original session still works. The new session function still works. The only thing you have to do is change how you initialize GoGM at the start of your program. So the changes in session V2 are a bit different. You can't explicitly make a session anymore like you could in GoGM v1, where you could just call new session and that's it. Now you have to do it through a GoGM instance because that's where it gets the driver from. So you have all of that. If you'll notice, everything has a everything that should have a context has a context. So basically anything that is asking Neo4j for something that involves some sort of bolt request, whether it just be begin the request or it's an actual query, it has a context. And all of these have spans, and the operation name just corresponds to the function that it's being called from. So
for people not familiar with spans or context, can you explain it a little bit more?
My bad. Yeah, so context in Go essentially it lets you pass data and timeouts between within a unit of work. So the most widely used context, to my knowledge, is in like API request. So the API, so you'd have a context in the scope of an API request. So one request, one context. And then what a span is how tracing goes through all of your calls. So one piece of a trace is a span. Actually, technically the whole thing is a span, but then you have child spans. So every time it goes down a layer, you create a child span off of the parent span. And then the root span is just the base call where the span started. So when you're using tracing with GoGM, it assumes you've already made a parent span and that you're passing in a parent span to make a child span off of. And for this, I'll also have more information on how to use this within the documentation. So yeah, that's where that stuff comes from. So I'm going to show more inside of inside of the integration test for GoGM, so you can see how V2 works. That we have in V2 that's been in the dev branch for a while is managed transactions. Previously, we did all of the managed transaction logic ourselves, but now that the Neo4j driver has managed transactions with managed retries, we basically just wrapped that and inject GoGM as a transaction work function. So to use a GoGM managed transaction, it's as easy as your session.manage transaction, you pass in the context, and then this transaction v2 is a GoGM object, not a Neo4j object, and then you can run Neo4j, or you can run GoGM operations off of it. Note, in the original implementation, you had to explicitly run rollback and commit within the managed transaction. In this, you don't have to do that anymore. If it errors out, just return the error. If there's no error, just return null. It's that simple. So this is just a basic example of how to use the GoGM managed transaction. Again, on Saturday, I'll go much deeper into how all of this works under the hood. Anyone who's interested in that, please read up on reflection, because that's how GoGM works. So yeah, and then with all the other functions, so I'll just scroll down. So for example, using query raw, you pass in a context, and then everything else is the same. So you give it your query, you give it your properties. Scroll down a bit more to another test I have. Okay, so yeah, this is doing a explicit transaction where you run session again, pass in the context, do all the stuff you need, save depth, pass in the context, commit, pass in the context. Yeah, so really to be more clear, the main difference is session v2 requires you to pass a context to everything, and then most of the function definitions are the same. So the other thing is we removed load by edge constraint from the session v2 interface, mainly because that was a convoluted implementation of something we felt needed to be more obvious in load rather than having its own function. So we removed that. So now you can do that through one of the versions of load, or just by writing a query and passing it in. So yeah, so that's the main difference between GoGM v1 and GoGM v2. What's still being debugged in the last thing before we actually publish GoGM v2 is we completely removed the dependence on uuids. What's in this commit hash that I'm demoing off of, base node no longer has a uuid in it. It just has the ID and the load map. And then for anyone wondering what the load map was, this tells GoGM how you loaded that node from the database so that when you go to save it, it can detect if you removed a relationship or not. So everything still has to have base node. But for anyone who wants to continue using UUIDs, like my company does, for example, we now have a base UUID node that you can have your nodes implement. So yeah, and within this, so the last thing that's happening, the save function was the way GoGM saves stuff to the database was heavily dependent on UUIDs, and that had to be rewritten. So that should be done today or tomorrow, depending on how well testing goes. But it will definitely be done by Saturday. And again, during the hack commit push, we'll go deep into how GoGM actually saves things, how GoGM converts the raw response from Neo4j into actual objects, and everything else that makes GoGM actually work. So to review, the main changes in GoGM are GoGM is an object now. GoGM supports open tracing and contexts. The old session is still compatible, just deprecated, and the new session has open tracing, has context support, and is a lot more efficient. So yeah, that's essentially what's new in GoGM. Like I said, as soon as this fix is done, it'll be released, and we're looking for feedback, and hopefully we won't have a GoGM 2.1 out too soon, but we're also happy to address any issues that come. So,
nice.
So yeah,
do you internally already use GoGM V2 at Mindstead?
Yeah, we've been using the GoGM V2 development branch for a long time, actually.
Okay.
GoGM V2 started as additional features we wanted for my company, but we didn't want to break what was existing. So that's where the V2 dev branch came from. And then we realized that it was about time to update GoGM again, because from extended use of the development features, we found it to be pretty stable. And from some feedback I got from people within Neo4j and from different issues in the community, we addressed those issues, and those are what is coming out in V2. So the one thing to note with the primary key fix, now the official Neo4j examples should work with no issue. Before we couldn't do some of them, like some of the ones that come with the default data set because of the UUID dependence, but those should work now. And the example inside of GoGM will be updated to use that data set. Nice. So, yeah.
And just to give more details, the dataset we're talking about is a movies dataset that people can grab through Neo4j desktop and, for instance, a Neo4j browser, when you can say :play and movies, I think, and you have the tutorial, and you can import a small dataset with actors, movies, producers, etc. So that's usually what we use for the official examples and community project examples as well. And indeed, I remember we had a small roadblock with this UUID strong requirement. But we wouldn't want to modify the existing dataset, so that's nice to know it's going to work out just fine now.
Yeah. And additionally, this also means the way we're implementing it is through a primary key strategy. So the default primary key strategy is just using default IDs. But this also allows people to use things other than UUIDs. We're allowing a generate new ID function to be implemented by the user. So say you want to generate like a random string, you can do that now too. We're also looking into letting the user define cipher queries to generate the ID. Like if you want to use APOC to generate your UUID instead of like the Google ID library. But that's not guaranteed yet. Based on the way Safe works, I'm not sure if I can get that in the initial release of V2, but it should be in one of the V2 releases. So so primary key strategy is the one thing I was not able to demo today because that's still being tested. But yeah, so now IDs are not determined by what my company needs. It's determined by what the community wants. So
nice.
That's the fun of open source, decoupling your own dependence.
Yeah, very nice.
So yeah, are there any questions or does
the
that
audience is a bit shy today because I don't see any questions there. May I ask again about when you think V2 is going to be released, or as I understand, you're still working on this UUID optional support, but
so if I'm able to solve the couple failing tests, so my requirement to get V2 released is all of the tests from before I updated that have to pass, and I have to have testing for the UUID, for not with UUIDs or with some other random ID type. Not all of that's passing yet. Mm-hmm. So as soon as those bugs are found and patched, it should be released. So my thought is that will either be today or tomorrow, Eastern time in the US. Today would probably be like 6-7 p.m. today if everything goes well. But if it's not, I can write something on Twitter, and anyone who's started GoGM will get an update when that's released. So yeah, like I said, my goal is for it to be today, but we all know that debugging is very unpredictable. At least this time, Neo4j started during the stream.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, it should be out. It should be out today or tomorrow. And again, for anyone who's interested in contributing, myself and my company's chief data scientist, Nikita Wooten, will be at Hack Commit Push this weekend for anyone who wants to learn how Neo4j. I'd love to learn how Neo4j works internally, but for anyone who wants to know how GoGM works internally, we'll be there, and I'll be giving crash courses and some good first issues to tackle. So yeah.
Nice. And there's going to be a Neo4j training, actually, an optional one. So if people are familiar with Go but do not know too much about Neo4j, mm-hmm. I assume they could, in theory, join the 2-hour training and maybe join GoGM afterwards, or what do you think?
Yeah, really all you need for GoGM is a basic understanding of graphs, a basic understanding of Cypher, and a basic understanding of Go. Other stuff that's really helpful, if you understand how reflection in general works, that's great. If you understand how Go reflection works, that's even better. And if you're comfortable with like tree traversal, that's also really good. For example, if you GoGM has a lot of tree traversal, but all the tree traversal uses reflection. So like this, what's it called? This parse, like for example, this parse struct function does tree traversal, but is looking for relationships using reflection. So if this is, so for example, if this line of code doesn't scare you, or or an even worse one. I'm
trying to scare away
contributors. Yeah. If lines of code like this don't scare you, or if seeing massive recursive functions doesn't scare you or even intrigues you, GoGM's definitely the place to look to contribute to. We have everything from this down to just like basic like session implementation stuff, Cypher query generation. Mindstand also has a Cypher DSL that we've been loosely working on for a while, but it honestly is pretty bad. We need some help with that too if anyone's interested. GoGM uses the DSL under the hood, but we haven't really worked on it much in probably a year and a half. So if anyone's interested in like builder pattern Cypher query generation, we can also introduce people to that too.
I believe I've seen also Neo4j DSL for Golang, but I've not checked it too much. I think I've seen at least one or two projects like this. It would be interesting if I can find that again and maybe see if there is a shared interest between GoGM and that project maintainer too.
Yeah, because we have in some scenarios where like I forgot to implement a certain like Cypher query, I just did that. Like I forgot to implement set in the DSL, so I just did it like that instead. So yeah, anyone who also is interested in Cypher query generation and writing actual DSL for Cypher and Go, we would love to talk. I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested in that.
Yeah, I will double check. I think I had a reference to the project somewhere, but I won't be able to find it right now.
So let me put this back up. So yeah, just to reiterate, GoGM v2 should be released today or tomorrow. Once it's out, I'll release it on GitHub and Twitter, and I'm assuming my company and the Twitter bots that republish releases will grab it too. So yeah, and we'll be talking about it on Saturday, I think.
Cool.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's still Saturday for me. It's still after midnight.
So right, yeah, it's after midnight as far as I remember, right? Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, if there are, I don't think there are any other questions, but if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, that's a general overview of the updates in GoGM v2.
Nice. So I may probably make up a random question since I don't see any questions there. If generics land in Go tomorrow, how would it affect GoGM code base in your opinion?
If what?
Would it help? If Go generics, if the generics finally land in the Go language, would that help in any way?
If generics landing, if generics landing like actually happening Go, GoGM v3 will be started immediately.
I see.
Because there's a lot of things that, because of the lack of generics in Go, we've had to do some interesting and more convoluted reflect type things to solve. For example, I would totally have just a base node that you have to extend instead of passing in an interface like this. It would probably speed up GoGM a bit because that would reduce the amount of reflection we have to use. But no, I would love to see generics in Go. But knowing the Go community, I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
I think I've seen the PR for the spec has been approved or something, but I don't know what's going to happen next and when.
I think I read that too, but I think there were, if I remember correctly, there were like thousands of comments of people arguing about whether it should be there or not. But I mean, I understand why they didn't have it in this version of Go, because you can have there's kind of generics, I guess. I mean, interface is basically just the equivalent of object in Java. So, so yeah, I mean, I like how they split apart, like including, like if I wanted to make GoGM, like it could also have all the things of config. I could just do that and it would inherit. And then splitting interfaces off instead of having abstract functions is a lot cleaner, I think. But yeah, GoGM the internals of GoGM would change quite a bit if generics existed. Also, templated stuff would be pretty cool too, because then you could just template the type of ID you have instead of passing it in as an interface and having to cast it and figure out what it actually is. But yeah, I mean, still better than Python in my opinion.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, and thanks for bearing with me with that random question.
Oh, no problem. I'm very opinionated when it comes to Go, just like every other Go developer seems to be.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, true. Cool. I don't think we have any other question here. So let's wrap this, I guess. So thanks again for joining today and for showing what V2 is going to look like. And V2 should happen very soon, as you told us. See you on Saturday for Hack Commit Push, and I hope to see some of the viewers as well, and hopefully contribute to GoGM as well. That would be very nice. And yeah, so let's keep in touch and see you soon. So thanks again.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me again.
Bye.